First of all, thank you everyone for coming on behalf of the Department of Sociology. We're really fortunate to have the opportunity today to be able to hear the research and have a discussion with Dr. Andriani Papadopoulou and Dr. Gemechu Abeshu on this really interesting and really important topic. The event is organized by the Department of Sociology and the Resource Center for Public Sociology, and it's supported by the Maurice Manel Colloquium Fund in the Department of Sociology, the Center for Refugee Studies, and the York Research Chair in the Political Sociology of Health, which is not just a title, but is also a person, that being Professor Carrie Wu. So thank you to all of the co-sponsors for making this event possible. I'd also like to thank staff in the department, Con Lee, our administrative coordinator, and Khushbu Maikapara, our administrative assistant. Con is here in the room, and Khushbu is helping to manage the Zoom. And I'd like to thank Nam, our work study student, for getting things going today as well. Okay, to get us started, I'm going to read a land acknowledgement. As members of the York University community, we recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. We acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tagaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I also want to read briefly an excerpt from another statement. This is a statement that was passed fairly recently by the Department of Sociology and the graduate program in sociology. And it's a statement that was developed at the level of the faculty of liberal arts and professional studies by a number of department chairs, arising out of concerns related to academic freedom on our campus. So I'm not going to read the whole statement because it is quite long, but I'll read a brief excerpt from it. We extend our heartfelt compassion and solidarity to all members of our community who are grieving in this moment. We condemn all acts of hate and violence. We stand firmly against all forms of oppression and discrimination, including all forms of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism. We are resolute in our support of all members of the York University community who speak up about the current war in Palestine, Israel, and who bring their expertise and experience to bear on public conversations. York University is a diverse intellectual community constituted by many views on a range of social and political issues, and both students and faculty have a great deal to offer on matters of such significance. York University must ensure a space for meaningful dialogue and engagement for its faculty and students without fear of reprisal. The university's protection of academic freedom, the right to freedom of speech, and the right to raise troubling questions and challenges to established beliefs is even more important in times of crisis. On that note about academic freedom, I just want to, before we get started, mention an upcoming event that has been organized by the Race Equity Caucus here at York University. The event is titled Academic Unfreedom, Speaking and Teaching Palestine. And this is a teach-in that will take place next Tuesday, 21st November from 6 to 8 p.m. There is a registration that people can follow or to access the event. It will be taking place over Zoom. Khushbu has put the registration link in the Zoom chat, and the registration info has been shared across the Department of Sociology listservs. If you're not in the department and you haven't seen this link circulating across other lists, but you are interested in the topic of the event, you can always check in with me afterwards and I'll make sure that you get it. Okay. I'm now going to turn things over to Sylvia Bawa, Associate Professor in the Department of Sociology and Director of the Resource Center for Public Sociology, to say a welcome, and then Associate Professor Carrie Wu and York Research Chair, who will introduce our speakers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for coming this afternoon. The Resource Center for Public Sociology, which has a physical location downstairs in N141, is a space for public sociology. We amplify the work of faculty members, students, and community members associated with the Department of Sociology in terms of the kinds of public sociological work they do, in hopes of linking the university with local, national, and global communities, and in making sure that our research work, which has relevance to policy, to social activism, and to work in general, can be shared outside the walls of the university. And so it is in this regard that this talk is particularly important in terms of its own connections and links with global communities and all of that. So I'm grateful that the speaker has agreed to have the talk recorded, which we'll later host on our website in the Resource Center for Public Sociology. We have a YouTube channel where we record some of these talks so that people who are not here present or who are in other parts of the world can later on access them. You can also pick up one of these really nice things and scan the back of it for more information about the Resource Center for Public Sociology. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker and thank you very much for coming back to York University as an alum of the department. We're really proud to have you and to speak to us on this topic and to our respondent. And I'll give the floor now to Professor Wu.
Good afternoon, everyone, online and offline. Thank you for joining us today. Like Sylvia mentioned, welcome back, Dr. Andriani Papadopoulou. She received her Ph.D. here at York in sociology in 1994. So really, welcome back. And currently, she works as a senior investigator in the Human Rights and Equal Treatment departments of the Greek Ombudsman. Her work look at research about combating discrimination and how vulnerable populations really invent their heritage in the host societies. So very welcome. We really look forward to her talk. And our discussant, Dr. Gemechu Abeshu, also is a postdoc fellow in our department, so in the sociology department at York University. He received his PhD at Bayreuth University in Social Anthropology in Germany, and his research looked at forced displacement and also racialized refugees, immigrants, and how their integration in the host society, and also interest in forms of non-state power. Right? So we look forward to his discussion, and very welcome, and we really look forward to this exciting talk. Over to you.
I hope it will be exciting. Before I start, permit me to say that I'm very pleased to be back here at York. It's very different from when I studied, but I feel deeply grateful for this opportunity. And for that, I have to thank my teacher, Professor Emeritus of York, Professor Alan Blum, first and foremost, and then the sociologist chair, Professor Mark Thomas, Gary, Sylvia, and of course the discussant of my talk, Dr. Gemechu. I hope I said the name correctly. Sorry. Move the slides. Why doesn't this move? Okay. Roma, irregular migrants, and indigenous people, marginalization, social exclusion, absolute exclusion in my sense. Why should we be interested in these three groups? And what does the social phenomenon of marginalization disclose? These are the two main questions that we would like us to think while I'll be talking about. We should keep these two questions in mind. I have to say at the forefront that my interest in connecting this group is because of my work. I have been examining cases dealing with the issues that pertain to these groups for the last 20 to 24 years. And I must say that thinking about it, I was not able to find, especially for the Roma, one thing that I could point that could tell me that there has been some improvement in their situation. There are some small changes, some small improvements, but overall, there has been no change in their situation. And for this, I think, is because the measures that are taken, the efforts that are made to integrate this population is not done at the level that it should be, that is of attacking structural discrimination.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you able to mute your laptop speaker, just so it doesn't pick up an echo?
Mute. Okay.
You unmuted yourself.
Thank you.
Andriani, I think it's the mute on the computer speaker itself, not on Zoom. If you turn off your volume.
The only thing is I can't find my key to do that. Sorry.
Let's see if I can. Is there a volume control sometimes it's done?
No, but maybe if we minimize the slides, and then we can run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where would the mute? Just right here. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Now let's try.
Okay. Okay, let's begin. Just the first simple picture of the three groups. The first are Roma, from a place in the south of Greece. This is a photograph that I took about 10 years ago. The situation hasn't changed since then. The second is a room of Indigenous people here in North Ontario. And the picture below is a center, a pre-removal center in Greece for migrants that I also took just a few months ago. To put the framework of what we're going to do today, I will try to exemplify a method of inquiry, how we should look at these two groups, where to focus. This method, as you should see, it involves three different steps, three different phases. Together with a method, we should attend to the issue that I hope it will lead us to think about the ways of exploring the problem. Because what we have to figure out is actually what the problem is, why those things happen, and why this should concern us. The three levels that I mentioned is that we begin with a description. We present the fact as we simply perceive them. And then we try to refer to some of the causes, explanations, why those things happen. And the third level, which I think we should all take with us, is to think about what is the underlying interest or the basis of this social phenomenon. Why should we be interested in this, as I said at the beginning? Just to place the talk in a general framework, I want to say what are the values that we utilize when we think about things. Myself, for example, why I think about those things. There are some values that we hold in this society, or we say that we believe in, that we think they're principles that we should abide by. And the problem is if we have marginalized groups, if you have groups that live in absolute exclusion and in inhumane conditions, What happens to these values? Don't we materialize them? Don't we put it in practice? And when we ask this question, what are we looking at? We are looking at if the state is consistent. Is that our problem? Again, these are questions that I posed at the beginning for you to keep in mind. The framework within which I work and which I consider these issues have to do with human rights. And what are human rights? Human rights are universal to all individuals, and they are indivisible. We cannot say you have a little bit of right about this issue, but not the other. Human rights are social constructions. There are entitlements to persons. We say persons have these rights based on their nature as humans, irrespective of their nationality, their race, ethnicity, disability, status, etc. We can put different characteristics in there. But we say these are all based on on the nature of humans. These rights are recognized in law and are meant to protect persons against actions of the state and of other actors who will try to erase them or violate them. They are so fundamental that are conceived to be inseparable from the notion of humanity. So to protect these rights, I think it means to uphold their holders' quality as human beings and to preserve and defend the rules upon which society declaratively operates. If the society says, we have these rights, this is how society is based on, then we should see them. And if we attend to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in the preamble, this is said, where is recognition of the inherent dignity of all the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. This has been said in many different ways, but it all points to the same issue, that we, in our world, when we act, we should consider humanity. And when we consider humanity, we think about our actions, our being, our connection to the world. As Hannah Arendt said, when she considered this issue in regards to Eichmann, she said, and so that Eichmann acted in total complacency, bureaucratically, doing the right thing, doing what he was told, not actually having evil intentions or hate or anything. She believed him and said, could the activity of thinking? He said he was not thinking. He was just acting, carrying out orders, doing the right thing as he was told. Could the activity of thinking as such, the habit of examining whatever happens to come to pass or to attract attention, regardless of results and specific content, could this activity be among the conditions that make men abstain from evil doing or actually condition them against them? So if we think, as I will show later on, that to marginalize people, to totally exclude people, to accept that they're human beings, fellow citizens who live in totally unacceptable conditions and have no access to procedures, methods, goods that will enable them to create a plan for their life and make their effort to pursue happiness, could that be evil? And what does this have to do with us? Human rights do not exist if the individuals are not able to exercise them. You can't say people are free if they cannot act freely. There is no distinction between yours and my rights, or my human rights are better than your human rights. Human rights are indivisible, as I said. They cannot be little or more of a human right. You cannot have a little or more of a human right. They cannot be acknowledged to some, but not to others. To friends, for example, and not to our enemies. Our enemies share the same human rights, and they are entitled to the same things that we are entitled if they actually are our enemies, or if they're foreigners, if they're totally strangers from what we are. If they believe things that we do not believe in. Even they have the rights that must be respected. The ability to exercise these rights is what constitutes us as humans in the social sense. We all share the same basic needs, the desire to live in dignity and to achieve a well-being. This is the thing that I don't put into question. This is the principle, as if it were, that I take for granted. And methodologically, you may ask questions about that, but I think this is what we all share and what we all strive for in life. And namely, what are these human rights that we are talking about, that we look for when we go to see the Roma camps, when we go to see where the migrants are held, when we go to indigenous people's reservations? The right to life. Can they live under the conditions in which they're under? Are they put into danger? Are they about to get sick because we put them into conditions which they cannot survive? The most basic right, the right to liberty and security. They're free unless they violate some rule, right? And they are having the right to be protected like everyone else. Freedom from torture, cruel, inhumane, and degraded treatment and punishment. There's the convention, the OPCA convention for that. Those are basic things, not to torture, not to cruel, inhuman, and degraded treatment. When we look at the conditions, which I will show in a minute, we should wonder, could they constitute torture and degraded treatment and all the things that the convention talks about? The right to human dignity. I mean, how would you define dignity? Being able to go to the bathroom without being seen by someone? Does this relate to human dignity? Right to no discrimination. In Europe, we have a lot of rules about no discrimination, directives. We distinguish between immediate and secondary discrimination. How does this appear into our world, and in what kind of actions is this demonstrated? The right to religion. Go through just by name. Access to information. What information do you need in order to survive, in order to take care of yourself, or to make plans for your life? The right to health. You don't put somebody in a room or in a place that you say, I have to check you to figure out who you are and if you constitute a danger for me, and at the same time put them into conditions that can get sick. Access to food and water. I mean, the most simple. Even in the airport, when somebody arrives, you have to provide for that because this is linked to the first right, which is the right to life. The rights of vulnerable people, the rights to family. We'll go through some of them as we go along. And, you know, even the right to property, I'm not talking about lands, although maybe when you remove somebody from a country, from a place and send them back, they may have acquired property. They have a right to that. But I'm talking about their shirts, their glasses, simple things. Okay. With all this, very quickly, I'm not going to take your time about the Ombudsman, but the Ombudsman operates as an independent authority, is constitutionally recognized, and it has the general mandates that all Ombudsman institutions have to mediate between individuals and the state, considering that the state has the bigger power and the individual doesn't. So that there will be compliance to the law by the part of the state, the public services, and that there should be no maladministration. Besides this general competence, we have additional mandates that have been given to us because we have been seen as being an institution who is independent and will stand for what the law and the constitutions have told us to do, our mandate. So we are the national preventing mechanism for the protection of the right of persons deprived of liberty under the Option Protocol of the UN Convention Against Torture. We have the mandate to investigate the arbitrary treatment of persons by the police, Coast Guard, the fire brigades, and the prison staff. So we go to all these places and we can examine the actions of the police. And this was assigned to us because it was found out that the internal investigation that the police does, usually when it had to do with foreigners, when it had to do with others, it was always done the right way. There was never a problem. Even when there were decisions by the European Court of Human Rights issued against Greece, even then, the police did the right thing 99% of the time. So now we have the mandate to investigate actions of the police, and people can refer to us or we can act on that on our own if we have evidence that something is not done correctly. We have mandate for the children's right, a mandate for non-discrimination, and we monitor the procedures of returning the illegally staying third country nationals, including the implementation of the EU-Turkey agreement, of which personally I take part of. So coming back now to our topic, I will use these aspects to refer to the life of the Roma, the migrants, and the indigenous people, the conditions of life, education, early marriages, access to labor, deviance and criminality, and political participation. And we are still at the first level, right? We're talking now descriptively what happens to the Roma, to the migrants, and to the indigenous people. The Roma, not all Roma, but my concern are the Roma who live in camps, because there are Roma who are fully integrated and they don't even want to refer to their origins as Roma. There are Roma who do very well, but I'm not interested in them. I'm interested in the ones that are left behind, totally. And the situation of the Roma in camps is in terms of absolute exclusion, geographical exclusion, and social exclusion. And this is not only the case for Greece. From as far as I can know, and I participate in fora that we discuss these things, the situation in the other Balkan states is similar, especially Bulgaria, Albania, Serbia, and all the neighboring countries. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. This is a settlement. Actually, this is a resettlement. This is done by a municipality. The Roma who were asked to live in these places, they had another habitat before. They had their own homes, some of them built by themselves, some huts in another area near the main road that led into a city. And the mayor didn't like that, so he said, okay, I'll take you from there. And he did it by force. It actually went one night with the bulldozers and demolished their homes, and in a land that actually did not belong to the municipality. So the actions were illegal, and it was done because he wanted to transfer the Roma and give them better conditions to live, where about 4.5 kilometers far away from the highway, in the middle of the mountains, he put those cement platforms, and he gave them the nylon and the little pieces of wood to set these homes up. You can imagine what will happen if a strong air if a strong wind comes, nothing would remain. There were two fountains, water fountains, which they could share. There was no water in each one of these huts. And there was a container that the municipality was going to bring water every now and then so that the water fountains would work. And no electricity. There were, I think, maybe some poles all around, but not in the cities. And there were some generators that were brought in. So if a person had medical problems and had to have a fridge to put in the medicine for diabetes, for example, couldn't do it in their home because there's no electricity and no access to, and actually nobody will give them electricity because the materials are so dangerous that they could catch fire. So this is another reason of them not having electricity. This is the kind of homes we're talking about. This is a girl. She was about 13 years old. She had already a baby. Her husband had disappeared, so the community was helping her to bring up the little baby who was just a month old when I visited the area. And of course, you see how she washes and how she tries to keep clean. And this is an irony. I like this. This is in one area where the establishment, the huts, were put on a landfill. On top of a landfill, they put the hut. It was very near the harbor. And the girl holds this poster that it was given to them during, not COVID, but another serious, I think it was the bird flu or something at that time. And the poster says, be careful, and gives them direction of how to clean themselves and how to be protected of the virus. Hats on the landfill, on top of them, and this is how they're going to be protected. The same thing now happened with COVID, right? When we had the COVID, and imagine the measures that were given us, how to keep clean and everything, and you are asking these people to carry out this type of actions in order to keep safe. Okay. These are the conditions. I mean, I can tell you many examples of how inhuman the conditions are. I'll tell you only one. One time I visited an area, a very small area, the huts were put on a parking lot. And actually the mayor there was making some effort to integrate them or to find housing, suitable housing for the Roma, was paying for a taxi so that the kids would go to school. It was a very small community, maybe 5 or 6 huts. And when I was there, a social worker came and told me, I would like you to come and see a home, a place, because there is a disabled person, and we have been trying for 5 years to find a place for this person to go to a facility. And I said, okay, let me see. I was thinking what the Ombudsman can do to facilitate. And I go to a place which, I can't describe it, but you couldn't even touch because of the dirt and everything. And the father of this child, which I thought, when they mentioned the child, I thought it would be a kid. It was an adult, disabled person who didn't have the legs, couldn't use the legs. And the parents were disabled, pneumatically. The kid, the father brought this person to me. I still think about it, and I can overcome the feelings that I have. And besides this kid, it was maybe a 16-year-old girl, a beautiful girl, again, with lower than a normal intellectual ability, a beautiful kid. And I said, what will happen to this kid if it hasn't already happened? And you have the social worker who's telling you, I have been trying for 5 years to find a place for them, okay? These are the things that we are talking about. Besides this condition, a large number of Roma do not have identity cards. They're not registered in the municipalities. They have no papers. Earlier in the 1970s, there was an effort by the Greek state to register everyone. And this is the only time that I can tell that they made a serious effort to register all people, to have them have an identity card so that they have access to benefits and everything else. Still, there is a large number of the population that doesn't have this, and the process to get registered is complicated. One thing that I have to say is a positive move is the action of the High Court of Greece to advise or to suggest to the Greek courts to take on the cases of Roma who come to and ask to be represented to the court in order to be able to enter the procedure that will eventually lead them to be registered, to have identity cards and so on. Because in order to be registered, if you have no papers from hospitals that are complete, from anyone else, is to have a court decision that tells us who you are, when you were born, what age you are, in order to be registered. This is a difficult procedure and it's not always followed, even when the persons do go there, but at least they have a legal aid to go to do that. Besides the Greek Roma, there are many Roma that have moved to Greece from other countries, as I said before, and that complicates a little bit of things because some Roma may have, they're European citizens, and some others do not. They're intermarriages, and again, with their papers, what are rights they're entitled to and not gets complicated depending on what group you belong to. So this is what we said. There are 3 types of settlements, and my biggest concern is with the first one, the one that there is an extremely degraded habitat. We call them the loose camps. These are homes as the ones we saw, with no running water, no infrastructure, no toilets, no nothing. And then there is the mixed camps. There you get both. You have some homes which are usually built by the Roma themselves. They're built without a license. In many times they do not have rights of the land which they build their homes. In other cases they don't have the proper papers. We do not know all of if these houses are safe and secure for them. And nobody checks. And besides them, there are huts. And there's a problem too with the with the community. If you have, since their early marriages, as we will say later, if you build a home for a family, at 14, 16, when the kids married, they push them out. So you have a hut next to a home, if you have a home. In those areas, there is some infrastructure, not complete, but there is some. There is some electricity, there are some roads, there is water available, although there is a problem. Who is paying for the water? There are not individual meters, a big mess. And usually it's the state that has to pay for this. But the issue is not really resolved. It is frozen. In some areas, even where issues of who is going to pay the bill is raised. And these are usually at the outskirts of residential areas. As we can see in the picture far down, there are the homes, and these are the huts, just near the road. The word Rome, some say derives from the word drom. The Greek word for road is dromos. So some make the connection with that, but And usually they choose areas where near the roads because they can easily live. Other areas where they can, they build their habitat is, if it is not a landfill, it will be under the bridges, near the bridges, river banks, areas where they can find material that they need in order to build their homes and to survive. This is a road that leads into a camp. You know, you have to drive about 4 kilometers to go to where the camp is, and this is on the way. And these are the children. And who is to be accountable of why the children are there, that they're not at school, that they have no future whatsoever, other than at the margin, in prison, and you can imagine. This is an establishment within Athens, and actually in a rich suburb. In there, you find some of these huts as well. Too many things to talk about, but just staying with a mixed home. You have some areas, though, where they're built like that, small roads, not really planned city, but they're set up and they're better than all the others. There you are. There are those as well. And there is an area, there are a couple of suburbs where only the population is all Roma. And in those areas, they have jobs, they have cars, they have, it's like a normal community. A little bit different than the others. Some infrastructure is lacking, but normal like all the others. Lipon, sorry, Greek word came out of it. The Roma at the local level, they're excluded from the other residents. Usually there is a geographical obstacle, a river, a bridge, something that separates the Roma from the non-Roma. And usually the people who live near the Roma neighborhoods, they complain. And they complain to us and to everybody else because their quality of life is affected. And it's affected in many ways. And you saw the materials that are spread. The biggest nuisance is the activity, it's survival activity for the Roma, is to burn tires, to burn cars, old cars and stuff, to get the metal, the material, to sell it so they can get some money. And that creates pollution. And it's first bad for them themselves, but for the neighbor as well. And there are other activities that relate to their livelihood actions, breaking ins, dirt, all these kinds of stuff. And the non-Roma neighbors most often complain, our life is unlivable because of this, and take them away. That's always the answer. Take them away. I want them to disappear. And the local communities, the local municipalities don't want them, and because they don't want them, they do not take action. In very few cases, you have mayors, municipalities where they will take action to assist and to try to integrate the Roma. And when this is done, you can see the result. But in most areas, they want them removed, and for their removal, they do not do things that they are required by law to do because the population belongs to their administrative borders, because they don't want to deal with this issue. They don't want them. It's an issue of racism. I have cases where non-Roma try to sell a home to a Roma in one of those areas where they have it, and the municipality does not issue them the proper papers so that they can do the paperwork for the selling of the house. It's a paper that says that they have paid their taxes. Okay, so the actions of the municipality go against the non-Roma as well if they want to enter into this, and they are accused of bringing in Roma into the municipality. The law about this paper now is changing, and perhaps we will have to not having to deal with this anymore, but we will see. Okay. The municipality is responsible for the housing and is responsible for the schooling of the Roma. And in almost all cases where there are large community or problematic Roma communities, they don't do the right thing. The only choice that they can think of is to get them out of the way, far away, which is illegal to do because you have segregation. So in my country, the problem is not with the law. The law most often provides of what has to be done, but the law is not applied. Sometimes there is some problem or some blank spaces in the law, but mostly is practical segregation. It's inaction, it's violation of the law by the people who are responsible to do the right thing. So the issues that we generally concern is the lack of citizenship, the lack of documentation, is the conflict between the Roma and non-Roma, is the policy of expulsion of the Roma from the lands of they occupy. We see this in every single case. Since the Roma do not have land, they will just stay somewhere. And this land, it may be public land or it may be a private land. If it is a private land, the person who owns the land wants them out because he wants to use their land. And if they do not leave, the person loses its property. There is a decision made for this issue by the European Court of Human Rights, and it concerns a community near Athens. If it is a public land, at any time, the municipality, the local authorities may decide to use this land for other reasons, to make an athletic facility, to build a road, to do something else, but not to give it to the Roma. Even the lands that are given for the Romans to be established, after some time, they may be taken back by a decision. And my question to them is, where do you want them to stay? They have no land, no money. They will stay between the earth and the sky. Where would they stay? They will have to stay somewhere. And if it is a private individual, you have to compensate that individual in order to allow them to stay. Or if you don't want to do that, you have to find a way to house them, but you cannot expel them. This is the position of the Ombudsman. They cannot be removed by force if you do not tell them where to go, if you do not tell them how they're going to be protected, housed. Moving from the conditions, we go to education. And for me, this is the most important issue. If you are to find a door open to integrate the population, you have to do it through the schools. Even if you build palaces, they cannot sustain them if they cannot find a job. And they cannot find a job if they do not have the credentials, if they cannot use the language, if they cannot function in society. And the lack of schooling, I think, for me, is the biggest problem. There is no real access to school. There are even in the areas where the students go to school, there is high rates of dropping out. And the measures that are taken against the dropping out, they're not really effective. If you are to integrate older students, young persons, 16, 17, who already have families, then they want to go to school, there are not enough second chance schools for them to go into. In order to increase the participation of the Roma in the schooling, the government tries to tie allowances, benefits with the schooling. But when it makes it a requirement and there are no facilities to do that, then the Roma cannot fulfill the requirement of the schooling, and at the same time they lose the benefit. Again, we have pointed this out in decisions that on first sight they seem to be good because we are trying to encourage them to go to school, and that's we link the benefit with the schooling. But on the other side, if you do not have the facilities for them to comply, to fulfill this, they cannot do it. So this is a basic issue for democracy. You can require people to do the right thing, to abide by law, if they cannot abide by the law because of the requirements that you put in place. Okay, this is what we mean by social exclusion. This is what we mean by structural discrimination. You cannot say that Roma parents do not send their kids to school if there are no schools for them to go to. First, you make the schools. First, you make available the teachers. First, you try to lead the kids to imagine that there is another way of life, and then you blame the parents that they do not send their kids to school. And even if there is such a thing of them not sending their children to school, which I do not find in most of the cases, then again the state is responsible for the children's education. It's the Convention of the Rights of the Child. If the parents cannot provide for the children, if they are not able to provide them the opportunities for a future, is the state responsible that it has to provide for that. And this, I do not see it happening. And that, I'm sorry, it makes me very angry. I do not want to have in the society in which I live children that do not have opportunities for life. I do not want children to grow up and the only option is to steal or to sell drugs or to do some illegal activity in order to acquire any of the basic goods that are available to others or which others have the opportunity to do it. Some of my colleagues and friends, when I speak about this, they says, you don't be so activist. They have the responsibility. There is the issue of individual responsibility, and there must be effort both by the parents and the individuals themselves. And what I say is, imagine if you are a child that grew up in one of those camps that I told you, okay? What does he know about the outside world? What opportunity does he have to get a job? What chance does he have to build a life based on dreams, to do anything? Okay, so when we have the stereotype of the Roma as the thieves, oh my God, okay, as the thieves, people who are unable to learn and they do not want to integrate, we should have this image. And I'm informed I have only a few minutes. So you get an idea of what the Romas are. Now you get an idea. This is a school. This is actually a school. And it was a school that was condemned by a decision of the European Court of Human Rights to us. The Greek government complied with the decision of the European Court, but only for the students that had appealed to the court. It complied with the decision, gave them the money, put them, the number of them that they have filed the case to the schools, to the other schools, but this school remains, and I don't have time to tell you about this school. But in any case, one important thing is, and that applies to the other two groups as well, that even in the absence of any discriminatory intention, even if the state doesn't want to discriminate, and even it wants to say, I did this for the right thing, and to avoid social discontent, to take care of things, okay, the court said that those type of actions cannot be considered as legitimate, okay? They are not justified by a legitimate aid, and that the state, in all the cases that have been brought before it, has not provided evidence that it has accompanied its actions by sufficient guarantee that it has taken care of those children as members of a disadvantaged group. this is an important issue for all the other groups as well. The European legislation and Greek legislation provides for adopting positive measures. Positive measures, the counter-argument is they create discrimination. A positive measure is to bring the disadvantaged population into the same level as the other, if you are to live in the system in which we live in order to compete, okay? And this was not done. Very quickly, to say about the migrants. The migrants and the Roma connect both. Because the Roma themselves were once migrant. They came into Europe at around, some say the 8th century, some say the 11th century. They traveled along the Ottoman armies and they were used as blacksmiths, as entertainers, and so on, and they moved into all the areas. They face anyone can be a migrant at any moment. This is a father and a child moving from the area which they come to after the recent fires in Greece, in the island of Evia. And this is a Syrian father with his child moving at the border in Idomeni, trying to find a way out of Greece to the other areas. Migration has always existed and always will exist. There is the play of Aeschylus, the suppliants, who talk about this, the right, how we have incorporated the values in religion and so on, especially the right to asylum. When some people come to our door, we don't know who they are unless we hear their stories, unless we look at their application. So not to provide them the procedures that already exist in the legislation for them to do so means that you are cutting them off and you are not applying the principles upon which you say your society is based on. There are different categories of why people leave, different reasons. Moving on, just to say this, when we think of the stranger, we should always think of this, that we do not choose where we're born, who our parents are, what our skin is, what our religion is, none of this, okay? It happens. And therefore, when we look at the other, we should put ourselves into their place and say, we are as strangers as they are. Or as Julia Kristeva says, that we should look at ourselves in order to see the stranger within us. These are the areas where the refugees live. This is a new facility that is built for them near the Greek border to house all as they come in. The conditions in which the migrants are put, they're similar to the ones I spoke about the Roma. They're a little bit better, but not a lot better. And just to close up, I mention all this because these issues are similar to the conditions faced by the Indigenous population. Here in Canada, there's discrimination and marginalization. I remember as a student here at York, one of the first books that I have read, it was Heather Robinson's Reservations Are for Indians. And the images I got from there, they're still with me. I had visited reservations when in the 90s in Canada, in Northern Ontario, and I don't see them as the conditions that I had seen then are very different from the ones I see in the Roma camps. The segregation of the schooling is acknowledged in such language that surprises me. And I think the biggest difference between the conditions that I know in Greece and in Canada is this an acknowledgement that the Indigenous people suffer what is called as cultural genocide, and that the schooling, the segregated schooling was done these are all similar to the Roma in terms of labor, in terms of reservations, in terms of being moved from their lands. They're all the same. The schools are done because the segregation of school was done to separate children from their families, culture, and identity. It was done because they thought they were lower people and they should either be eliminated or totally absorbed into the new cultures that came in, the Christian cultures, and because theirs were not good enough, they were the law. Now, to close off, there are many ways that we can explain why this happens. There may be some people who will say that there was resistance to assimilation. They fought against the issue of foreignness, the cultural aspects of it were so different, and this is what created the problem. Some people will say that the non-Indigenous, non-Roma, non-migrants have no sense of reality, no real sense of the facts, and that is in many cases true. But if you have not knowledge, then you should try to find out. Sociologically, we can use all the theoretical models to explain the situation. Class struggle, an equilibrium, cultural differences, and so on. In terms of our reaction to it, we can say that, why am I interested in this? Out of curiosity or out of self-interest. I don't want them to bother me. I don't want to live in a community where there is pollution because of their activities. Others may say, well, oh, the poor Roma, oh, we should help them, the philanthropic interest. There are others that will talk about the general good. We should have a good society and where everybody could be happy and be able to implement their dreams. Some will say, don't bother, this is a lost cause. I hear that all the time. Don't be an activist. You did what you could. In terms of theoretical interest, some will say, let's try to eliminate the gap between the people who are in society, the ones who are in the margins, try to integrate them. Some people could say, we should try to have a kind of government, a kind of system that will exemplify caring, that it will be good governance, that will try to include all those things. We should have an effective utilization of resources. I didn't even mention the resources that are spent in order to house or to educate the Roma. This is another sad story. Closing. Some will say that we should identify, we should be interested in this because we want communities to be preserved because they're different. Pluralism. We should choose which communities offer something to humanity, and that's why we should preserve. But I think, for me, to be concerned about this issue is because I want to keep the interest in humanity alive. What I said at the beginning about Hannah Arendt. It's an interest in justice and fairness. This is a value in our society, and it just doesn't happen on its own. We have to take an interest in this. Why should we take an interest in this? There is no answer. There is not a good, as Professor Blum will say, a cause and effect thing that would tell us do this because you're going to gain something. You do this because through your action, through taking interest in what is happening around you, and not being a stranger like Camus' characters. Mother died today, so what? There are Roma who live in dehumanized situation, so what? Move on. take care of yourself. For me, is to keep this interest alive that marginalization brings forth. Instead of justice, some will say, well, we should care about good life, Trubin, Alithea. We don't want people to see people in such ugly conditions because it disturbs us. To talk about an interest of justice, for me, is to talk about humanity. It is the activity that generates a feeling of exaltation. I'm alive, I'm concerned about what's happening in my world, and that tells me that I live amongst others. To integrate is not an easy process. The aim must always be in equal participation in all aspects of social life. Everything that we do, each one of us, from our post, from our position, small or large step, is to be towards this direction, relentlessly think about what is happening around them and try to bring people in so that everyone has the opportunity, as we say, democracy is based on. That's it. And not being able to balance the issues of all three groups.
Thanks very much for a comprehensive and impassioned presentation. Let's turn to Gemechu for a commentary or a response, and then we'll have some time for discussion.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank the chair of the Department of Sociology for this invitation to give my remark as a discussant, my first as a postdoc in the department. And let me congratulate Dr. Andriani for this excellent presentation. I had the privilege of reading the whole slide, 96 of the slides page of them. In her presentation, Dr. Andriani has showed with enough supporting data the state of life, or rather say state of deprivations lived by three population groups, the Roma, irregular migrants in Greece, and the indigenous peoples of Canada. And you have used 6 dimensions for comparison. 1, conditions of life, education, early marriage, access to labor services, violence and criminality, and political representation and participation. I have to congratulate you by because you dared to bring together 3 very diverse groups to shed light on their common experiences along those 6 dimensions. And by using those dimensions, you have presented how life is on the margins for these groups of people. And you have indicated how the gap between the social and economic conditions of the indigenous people and the non-indigenous people in Canada, the Roma and the non-Roma in Greece, the regular migrants and citizen is wide and is persisting today. And which is a common denominator among the 3 population groups you used in your lecture. And in reference to the similarity, there are slides which were devoted to actually pointing out the commonality in terms of the experience of the 3 population groups. I can also state that your lecture on social exclusion and racism experience of these 3 population groups is in tune with existing knowledge in literature. Just as an example, for instance, a recent study of the Roma indicates the prevalence of anti-Roma racism, and there are other studies which point to the existence of life on the margins, the racism, the exclusions, not just in Europe, but also even in Canada when the Roma comes here. And with reference to the lives of regular migrants, and including refugees, in Greece, for instance, Mastenios and his colleagues point to the institutionalized racism against refugees in Greece. Similarly, other studies which focus on, which draw data from a diverse population groups, refugee groups from Asia and Africa, point to the life of racism and discrimination, so to say that the presentation actually speaks to existing state of knowledge on the subject. Having said that, I have a couple of questions or remarks as a way of comment. The first one will be methodological. The rationale for the multi-case analysis of the Roma, irregular migrants, and the indigenous people of Canada, who are not homogeneous as such in and of themselves, requires some clarification. So to start with, the irregular migrants who enter Greece come from a diversity of countries in Africa, in Middle East, in Central Asia, and South Asia. And these, not just because of the political circumstances of their forced displacement, but also in terms of ethnicity, religion, sexuality, gender, age, are so diverse that it's really very difficult actually to lump them into one fold, so to say. It's very difficult. And there's a critique against homogenizing the experience of refugees and migrants as well. Even the experiences of the Roma themselves varies. The living circumstance of the Romas within the Greek context also varies. I mean, you have alluded to how some of them are living what can be considered as better off. So the question I will be asking, or a comment I will be putting up, is to say that a clarity in terms of how we can put these three very diverse population groups. And we have to bear in mind that there are actual improvements in terms of the living conditions of the indigenous peoples in Canada, for instance. We have a Governor General of the indigenous people. We have the first Premier of Manitoba, newly elected. But there are changes coming up. So how can we put all of that into one point? The second question is, or comment I should say, is more of theoretical. Going through your slide and listening to your presentation, I saw you made reference to concepts of human rights, theories of value, if I understood them correctly, but I haven't come across a theoretical perspective that encapsulates all the materials that have been presented to make sense of the rich body of data that has been given to us. And also it speaks to one of the two questions you started your presentation with. So would it be possible to have a kind of clarify the theoretical underpinnings of the whole material, if that is deemed right? I should acknowledge, and I've went through the slides twice, it provides a rich empirical contribution, to be honest, because it draws on data from Greece and then from the irregular migrant of the Roma and then of indigenous people. There is a rich empirical contribution. What do you think will be a theoretical contribution? And this, I assume, will be in the sociological speaker series. So what will be this contribution, this presentation contribution to sociology scholarship? And in what specific area you think that will be? I have a couple of substantive questions. There is an interesting observation around early marriage, for instance, which is too close to the Roma's way of life, I understand. The question is, and not necessarily to you, actually, it's to everyone. What is the boundary between law and culture? Early marriage is in many legal provisions something that is not allowed, but some cultures actually exercise that. So what? This is an anthropologist speaking in me. So what is the boundary between law and culture, so to say? So the conventional elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, and the cultural practice of early marriage, as an example. In your presentation, you have established very clearly that the life of the Roma, in particular, is a life on the margins, and particularly drawing on your specific cases. For instance, in reference to the Roma, your lecture has argued that they are spatially and socially excluded from the other non-Roma residents. And large part of the Roma population is invisible, and they don't even have identity card to live in the country that they live in. Their houses are regularly demolished down, and they are refused access to social benefits which are available to citizens. They don't have real or easy access to education, and which is compounded by high school dropout. And you give a reference to, you give a reference to how actually that is the highest in the 9 countries used in the survey, and it is happening in Europe. And actually, one of the key reference which really touched me is how the Roma are treated as subhuman who are unable to learn. Now, while acknowledging the challenge faced by the Roma, the irregular migrants and indigenous people in Canada, which are important and incredible things to do, don't you think it will draw attention from the agentive capacities and the resilience of the people who, despite and in the face of all those challenges, survived through and thriving in some context? So to say, there are challenges experienced by these people. And most of the articles that I have read about the Roma often emphasize the challenge that they face and less on the agencies and the resilience of the people who survived the Second World War and are still, despite all these challenges, are living and thriving and using, I want to borrow Professor Kyriakides' concept of authority to act in the face of all these challenges. I have more, but I'm going beyond my time, so I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gemechu.